Okay, we're going to call the public safety meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Boyd.
Present.
Alderman Ornowitz.
Here.
Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderman Muhammad. Alderwoman Boyd.
Here.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Here.
Chairman Vaccaro.
Present. I know that Alderman Muhammad had already asked to be excused, and I believe Alderwoman Howard is still in the health meeting across the hall. But we can do it at the end. Need approval of the minutes from the previous meeting? Do we have a motion?
I move for approval of minutes dated June 5th, 2019.
Second.
Wait a minute, no. From,
Yeah, June 20,
it is, did I call it all right?
It's for June the
June 10th.
June 10th.
June 10th, 2019.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
I'm sorry, who seconded that?
I think it was Pam Boyd.
Alderman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Ornowitz.
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderman Muhammad. Alderwoman Boyd.
Here.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Chairman Vaccaro.
Aye.
It's 5 aye votes.
So we passed the minutes. That was exciting. Alderman Bosley, if you want to go ahead and explain your bill, and we'll move right along here.
So good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for your time. This is Board Bill 81. It's basically just refining the curfew laws that exist within the city of St. Louis right now. Right now, what is the curfew is it's 11 o'clock p.m. On weekdays to 5 o'clock a.m. and weekends it's 12 o'clock a.m. to 5 o'clock a.m. What we want to do is change those laws to 10 o'clock p.m. on weekends and 9:30 p.m. from Monday through Thursday during the weekdays. Of course, you all know there's a lot going on within the city right now. We have children that are being subject to violence based on the fact that they're outside past curfew and should not be. So the last time this was looked at was in 1997. We got about 12 years in between there, so we definitely need to be looking at refining. As the generations change, we have to change with the generational behavior. A few other things that changed in this bill. We had 40 hours of community service after the first time that we caught your child out. Police has the opportunity to discern between whether or not he's in violation. So he talks to the parent, we give you a written notice, child services are contacted, and we can find out whether or not you need resources and just kind of what's going on to where and why your child was out past curfew. That same thing applies here in this board bill, which the first act that takes place is the same way that it was in the last bill. The difference is when you are in violation, the second time your child is in violation, initially what could have happened is you could have had 40 hours of community service, up to 60 to 90 days in jail and paying between $100 and $500 fine. So we're changing that to on your first offense, you can be subject up to 10 days in jail, paying between $300 and $500, and do 60 hours of community service. And we're giving you, just not the same repercussion for your violations each time. It kind of goes up. The second time you're in violation, you're subject to 20 days in jail. And you do $400 to $500 in fines contingent upon what the judge orders, and 100 hours of community service. And the third time it's 150 hours of community service, which said juvenile up to 30 days imprisonment, and which would be that maximum $500. So you won't be doing all three of those. It's up to the judge. That's just pretty much what the bill outlines and the changes that are in it. I'm sure you all know exactly why I'm presenting this bill. It's just extremely important for us to start looking at what we need to change within the city so we can have a change in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Boyd, any questions?
Not at this time, thank you.
Alderman Arnowitz, any questions?
So, Alderman, your idea is you want to make this curfew go into effect for basically 17 and under?
Yes, sir.
You ever move the microphone?
And And then, you know what, I'm so old, what's even a current curfew? Mine used to be street lights.
Understood. Yeah, right now it's 11 o'clock p.m.
On weekdays?
On weekdays, 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. and 12 a.m. to 5 a.m. on weekends.
So your idea is, all you basically want to do is just change it from...
Change it from that time and bring it down to 9:30 and 10 o'clock. 9:30 during weekdays and 10 o'clock on the weekends. It's an hour, give or take an hour and a half.
And I mean, I like the concept of it. It's just, how do we get it enforced? But I guess making the parents responsible too would help. And I get it, believe me, because here the problem, a lot of young kids, unfortunately, have been shot at and killed just sitting in front of their house. I mean, I applaud you wanting to move forward with something, and I don't have a problem voting for this.
I appreciate it.
No.
Definitely trying to make something happen. Thank you.
Okay, we go down to Alderwoman Pam Boyd. Any questions?
Yes, I do. Alderman Bosley, I do support this. I'm just looking at, because after we had talked about it and I read it, we are looking at, what I see this is going to happen is we're looking at improving the community, the police community outreach part.
Right, exactly, and this is kind of what that does if you look at it from a different viewpoint, right? We always have this distrust with the police because generally when you interact with them, it's always an interaction that isn't so pleasant because you may be breaking the law. This gives us an initiation in the beginning to kind of plant a seed in the kid's mind where, police can interact with you and help you with resources at the same time before you get to that point where as we know, living in particular neighborhoods can take you down a certain path. And if you're outside past 10 or 11 o'clock, 9 times out of 10, something's going on in the house, you're not being supervised, or you need resources because you don't feel comfortable in the place where you're supposed to be. So I think early on, looking at what it is we can provide as a city, and sometimes we got to be a little nosy to do so, it breeds a better environment for us, and it helps our situation. We keep talking about addressing the root issues. There's no way for us to address the root issues when, the individuals who really need the help aren't reaching out. Sometimes we got to reach out and look in and care that much to do so. So this is looking at it from another angle, absolutely kind of helping things, on that bottom level and creating a different type of community police relationship.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to, Alderwoman Hubbard. I think, well, she's just getting here from health, so we'll go ahead and we'll come back. We got Christine too, so.
Okay. Good afternoon, Alderman Bosley.
Good afternoon.
First of all, as a mother of 5, raising my children in the city of St. Louis, I wholeheartedly see where you're going with this. I agree with where you're going with this. I think that per our conversation, this is a tool that we can use to try to fix this problem. I expressed to you that I had people that said your hours were still too late, that they wanted the hours to be high, earlier. But I do have a couple of concerns that I wanted to ask you to get your opinion and get your thoughts on.
Yes, ma'am.
First, I know this again, the bill is from 1997, and I know that things are so different now. And then back then we had the curfew centers, and the police implemented the curfew. I mean, they enforced the curfew, took them to the curfew centers, and then the people in the curfew, juvenile enforcement officers and things in the curfew centers, enforced it from there. Who do you see enforcing this this particular curfew now?
So sometimes it's not always about the enforcement of it, it's about the engagement of it. When we are trying to fix a problem, and that's any issue, it could be the piping in your house, plumbing here, there are issues in the community, you have to use particular tools. And depending on what the need is, you have to use that tool to fix that need. This is an extra tool for the police officers in the community because they are strapped, and they say that they have they're working call to call and really don't have the numbers. What this gives us is an opportunity when they do have a little bit of a break going from call to call, if they need to pull that tool out the toolbox and say, hey, let's say, for instance, they catch a bunch of youth maybe looking like they're going to engage into, a fight, just something they could be driving past that they usually would not have the tool. They can hop out and say, hey, you need to get home because of curfew. Maybe they were not around prowling the streets looking for individuals who might be breaking curfew, but running across individuals who look like they may be outside and they shouldn't be outside, and for their protection at the same time, because we are working on fixing other problems in the city. This is a tool that they can use at their discretion to say, hey, I think I need to engage in this right here. I don't expect them to be able to go out across the entire city and just enforce this every day, because we are short individuals, and that, is also a reason why I think, with the curfew centers is something that we'd have to look into as time goes on, because we don't, we all will come back to funding and, who's going to, man those particular buildings. So, we just have to look at the tools that we have right now and how we can implement this, and as time goes on, we tweak it. As time changes.
Since you spoke to the officers, the police officers, being able to use their discretion, their discernment, for lack of a better word, given the current climate of the community and the police, do you trust that will be used properly, that they'll be able to discern a youth or a young adult, or just the interaction fairly?
So what that would come down to is us ensuring that we all are kind of engaged in this process. Not necessarily you getting a phone call at 10 o'clock and saying that such and such is outside, but in the event that you hear something that is not right, we have to be vocal about those things. One of the reasons why we do have this disconnect with police when things happen, because we find out about it, we don't find out about things, or we don't address them initially when they happen. We kind of wait and let things fester. So I think as the community kind of opens up and has more conversation about what officer is doing what, and the officer can say, no, this is what happened. We have to address issues as they pop up, and we have checks and balances. As the police use discernment, we also have judges who have to judge. So contingent upon the actual issue, how things are written up and what's being said by, on a case-by-case basis, I think we just have to work towards creating an environment where the trust is there, because right now there is no trust, but we have to start somewhere to start building that trust. And I think it starts on more of a level where youth have a chance to have a different perception of what our reality already is, where there is no trust. We have to start, giving everybody the tool to be able to start that conversation. It's a very hard conversation to start. Because everybody's uncomfortable. But like I always said, we got to get uncomfortable to get comfortable at this point. Yes, some officers may utilize this in the wrong manner. We can't negate that. Just like when they make just regularly out day to day, mistakes are made, and sometimes decisions aren't made in the way that the community sees fit. But you have a lot of officers that go out and do the right thing. Right, so we just have to continue to work towards getting more of them from our perspective who we feel like are doing right than wrong. I think, we're going to have issues, but that it just comes down to us making sure we address them immediately and work towards having, I think, a sustainable city where children know that they have a chance to make it to 18.
Absolutely. Speaking of that chance that we want to give our youth, because I believe wholeheartedly in giving especially our youth another chance, the diversion programs and things like that. I know when I was a youth, my best friend in the world, mother worked overnight at the Salvation Army, and we ran the streets. And she was a single mother raising my best friend. But the truth is, if this would have been enforced at that time, she would have been fine. She would have been summoned. She might not have been able to make it. Can you just speak to, so that we make sure that this doesn't come off as predatory, can you just speak to the wraparound, the resources that you said this would give a family like that who just might not, we do have some children I know that might need this kind of enforcement, but what about the parent that's just trying to make it and her child or his child might just be making the wrong choice that night? Can you speak to how this won't set them up within the system to fail?
Yeah, absolutely. Understand. That's understood that we do have a lot of parents who are having hardships. Like, if we didn't, we'd be a lot further as a city. I completely get that and understand that. But that's where, once again, discernment comes from and accountability comes in. You know, so the initial time that you have an interaction and the police have to engage, they find out what's going on. They don't just say, I'm taking you to jail. You call your parent, contact your mother. And, of course, they're going to ask, why is your son out this late? They'll get an understanding of why he's out. But that's where that rapport comes to be built at the same time. If they know you out working at 3 o'clock in the morning and you got a 14, 15-year-old kid out running the street, when they see that kid, they can identify with him and have an understanding of who he is and where he should be because he's already spoken to a hard-working mother. And that's where that discernment comes in at, let's say hypothetically speaking, you teach him to do everything the right way. You teach him to be respectful. Maybe this night he doesn't feel like being respectful. He want to run around with his friends. So he argues with the police officer. And unfortunately, even with the rapport that you all has, he has to teach him a lesson. Hey, I need you to come with me, and then you come pick him up. He's not going to jail immediately. He's being detained until you come and pick him up as a parent, and we have that conversation, right? So I don't think it's hurting mothers because the judge has the last word, and you don't get fined and, you get this and that imposed on you. You can be fined or have this and that imposed on you. So it's all contingent upon what the judge wants to do. But we have to have strict laws on the book that at least for those individuals who just aren't trying, who the judge, when he does have interaction, the police have interaction, they can tell the difference between people who are trying and who are not. And that's not to say that's not going to always, that discernment is not going to be always used in what we would consider a positive way. Some people are going to do the wrong thing. We can't negate that. But for those who are doing the right thing, that 90% that I think, or 85%, however people want to take it, they'll be able to utilize this as a tool where they can actually help families, and we can get to a point where you don't see that generational issue happen with families where you see this cousin and that uncle and that auntie, the whole family then been to jail. We can break that cycle, but we have to be more informed to do so, and we actually got to step into individuals' lives who may not be asking for help because you might not have time to talk to an officer or ask and say, my child is out running the streets. You might be at work going from job to job. So if we have the ability to at least take a look and give resources for those who really want them, it's not saying that, you got the resources, but we still are going to take your kid to jail. It's like we getting you resources, and whatever we can do to help, let us know. That's where that discernment comes in. Our object is not to have people paying fines or going to jail, which is the reason why we took it from 60 to 90 days, and you get 10 days, 20 days, 30 days. If you can't keep your kid in the house for 1 day, we can't expect you to keep your child in the house for 60 to 90 days while you're gone, especially if you're a single parent. And that's once again, where the discernment comes from. And you have an option to knock all of that jail time out about doing community service. You're not doing jail time or a fine if the judge say, and this is what it says, that, you can just do community service with your kid. It's as simple as that. So sometimes you got to spend time with your child, and, that's what it forces for you to have that conversation and say, we out here cleaning up the city, and all you have to do is stay in the house, then that, we just got to take it there.
Yeah, that's easy. So, thank you. Again, as a mother of 5, a favorite auntie of many and everything, I am encouraged at your tenacity and your will to do something to help our children out here in the city of St. Louis. So thank you for this. I'm going to support it, and I look forward to us using this properly and praying for the discernment. And I love I love the way you put it. It's not about enforcement, it's about engagement. I think that's a powerful way to state it and to put it to the community. So thank you again, Brandon, and I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Alderwoman Howard, any questions? And then Christine, you're next.
Good afternoon, Alderman Bosley.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for introducing this legislation. I think it's prudent, and I think that, making parents responsible is a good idea. However, I have some concerns about youth that may be working during some of the hours for curfew, and I didn't find any exceptions. I mean, a child that's out, some of them may walk to and from work. I raised children, and they worked at McDonald's, and sometimes, they were out past curfew because of employment. They weren't out, causing havoc. So I guess, that isn't addressed in here, and I'm kind of concerned about that.
So, in section 4 on page 2, and I guess exemptions probably should have been in bold there.
Line 37 to 38.
So, yeah, 37 and 38, it speaks to.
Okay, I see.
Yes, ma'am. So we did kind of think about that, and this is actually almost, if I remember, it's verbatim from the last one. I think they.
The other
some good
question I
exceptions.
have is, have you investigated, does this come from some research that shows that other cities that have, narrowed the window of, reduced the number of hours that juveniles are allowed out under curfew? In other words, we're rolling it back from 11 o'clock to 9:30. Did it result in any decrease in crime or criminal engagement?
So I have not done any extensive research on has it worked in other cities. I just kind of took the idea from understanding what's going on in this city and thinking, when you see all these kids outside at night, it's just like a no-brainer. It's like, man, you need to be in a house. I've taken too many home, and they literally outside just because they can be. Don't have nothing to do in the house. And at 10 o'clock, just go home. You don't need to be out here in the streets. So it's just an idea. And, if it doesn't work, we can always change things. But I just don't think it'll make things worse.
I guess what my concern is that 9:30 is, why did you change the hours of the original one?
So the sun is going down a little later in the summertime. It goes down around 9:30. So that's the reason I said for most of the week. In the wintertime, we know it's down around like 6 or 7, so it gives them a little bit of playtime under the street lights before the environment is changed and they understand in the atmosphere. The police may say something to you if you're outside. You can get home. It gives you a little bit of time. 11 o'clock seemed in this day and age just a little too late because so many things are happening along 11 o'clock. 9 times out of 10, the police are not going to ever have the time to respond, whereas around 9:30 or 10, it's a little bit of time where they can actually see something before things get too bad for them out there. And the sun, once again, in the summertime is going down right around 9 o'clock. You got 30 minutes to get home. On the weekends, give or take 10 o'clock because you're out bike riding with your friends or doing whatever it is you might be doing.
The street lights are on.
Yes, ma'am.
Because when the street lights are on, that's when everybody should be home.
I agree.
That's the way I grew up.
Yes, ma'am. I grew up the same way and then kind of watched everything change and just trying to get back to that place where we saw less kids in the street without supervision at night.
And I do have concerns about enforcement, as the Alderman Hubbard expressed. I guess my concern is more that, I have a hard time getting police to monitor the highways and byways and the side streets in my ward as far as speeding and those types of things. I just hope that maybe this will prove to be a way of getting youth where they belong and under supervision.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. That's definitely the hope. And I think if we enforce it even a little bit, that the word can get around just a little bit, in some communities, in some places. Hey, some of them curse, some of them don't, but that does deter some people.
And sometimes I don't think it's that parents don't care. I think sometimes they don't have control of children.
Yes, ma'am.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Christine.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you.
Good afternoon. Always a pleasure.
I guess I wanted to piggyback on the Alderwoman from the 14th's question about research. I haven't done extensive research on this, but have definitely anything I've ever read says that curfew laws, as they've existed, have never worked, and many cities are starting to repeal them. And so it would, I guess, be thoughtful to think about, looking at what we know is working and not working. And I'm curious if you've talked to anybody in the police department. I'm concerned, just we study after study talks about, the fact that a lot of these laws disproportionately affect people of color. And so how the police department and our officers are going to be communicated with about the discernment piece, and then, equitable application of the law.
Right. So with that, and this is 100% out of respect. I'm always, I try to be as respectful as possible. What made me think about it is because I'm African American, and I see a lot of these African American kids just, at this point, like I've watched the transition go from you got to be in the house when the street lights is on to you can be outside to whenever you want, long as you're in a park, or you walking down the street, or you sitting. The point is, seeing those things and understanding where there used to be order, we are completely losing order. And, regardless of kind of what's going on in other cities, St. Louis is very, very unique. And that's why a lot of things that we do try from other cities, some work, some don't. And this is just kind of one of those things that if it works, it works. And, it's not supposed to solve all of our issues. We don't have the manpower. It's impossible for the police to enforce this in a way where we see every single kid in the house, but they do have the possibility to engage those kids who they know may be into something, who they see out during the daytime, or those kids who they know your mama wouldn't tolerate you being out here this late, you need to get home. And given how, the city is, and statistically how and when violent crimes happen, we're at a point where we're seeing them during the day now, but we also can look at how things happen at nighttime. And it's generally after 11 o'clock where you see children being shot. And it's generally after, 11 o'clock where you're seeing multiple homicides, you're hearing multiple shots. Of course, once again, you hear them during the day, but we know they're more prevalent at night. So the idea is just to, if we can save a few, if we can get these kids in the house and get the environment to change so them themselves are pushing the message that, hey, when I'm in school, they'll speak to their friends. Man, I got locked up last week. I wasn't supposed to be. And unfortunately, some of these kids treat that like a badge of honor. But if you're talking about it, those individuals who don't want nothing to do with it, they're going to be like, man, I'm going in the house. I'm going to go sit on my front porch. The goal is to try to change the atmosphere, and not necessarily to go around and have them enforce this and impose this on every single kid. But if they engage with them at least and say, hey, I'm such and such, I could take you to juvenile, but I'm not. I could call your mama. I just want to see you at home. Walk home. I think it starts to create some type of rapport with the officers, and it starts to build community relations, and that's something that we need, and we need to start looking at what resources people need, and it's impossible for us to do that if we cannot identify the children who we think have a need at this particular point. And any child that's outside after 10 o'clock that's not doing something productive, we need to know kind of what's going on, and if they need resources, because 9 times out of 10 they do.
Okay. Last question is, so to that point, which I think is really important, who in the police department are you working with to make sure that those are the kind of conversations that are going to be happening on the ground?
So I've talked to one of my captains. He has reservations about the bill. He wants curfew centers and other things, which is completely understandable. But I'm a member of this board, and I know that certain things are not necessarily out of our hands, but it takes a long time for us to get them within our grasp. And especially when we're finding for funding and looking for things that can be not necessarily daunting, but it can be something that sometimes is almost impossible to achieve based on the different personalities and understanding from each person's perspective where they feel like money should be going within the city. So I think when we cannot address monetary issues right now, at least concerning the police officers and giving them adequate wages to where they're not leaving, going other places, then I definitely don't think we're going to be able to find the money to deal with some of the issues we know that we really kind of need to deal with going along with this, but at least we can start the conversation and have the tool in the toolbox if it's needed.
Okay, thank you, and I know that you're always putting kids at the forefront of your work, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Boyd has follow-up.
Yeah, Alderman Byers, I want to thank you for, again, your passion for wanting to do things differently. And certainly this is a bill that is, again, another tool in the toolbox. And I certainly understand and respect that, you know, certain populations may say that African Americans may be disproportionately impacted by this. But I see that African Americans are disproportionately impacted by violence against African Americans. And so it's getting warm outside. For some reason, people feel that children don't have enough to do, but they need to be at home at a reasonable time. I support that. I like, again, how the Alderwoman for the 26th said this, and you said this is the opportunity to do some engagement, but it is also an opportunity to do some enforcement. Because engagement without consequences of bad behavior does nothing. And I certainly don't support rounding up a bunch of kids all night long, you know, putting them in curfew centers and taking them to North Patrol, because that's what services my particular area, and sitting there waiting and calling parents. But there comes a time where there may be a need to pick up a group of kids or some kids that's out there being mischievous. And we need to hold their parents accountable. I like what you said. You know, you've seen a transition from you be home before the lights get on. And that happened 30 years ago. And now it's be home whenever, almost. And it's unacceptable when a parent doesn't know where their child is at 10, 11 o'clock at night. And so we have to do something because what we're doing now obviously is not working. And I certainly support this. I certainly will hope also that it doesn't turn out to be something that people perceive as just another attack on the African American community, because at the end of the day, we have to own our issues. And some of our issues is not being the type of parents that we need to be to our children. You know, one of the things about me, I'm tired of excuses. I'm tired of giving an excuse for everything that's going on in somebody's household, because we all have choices and there are options. And unless somebody's living under a rock, you know, there's a neighbor, there's somebody they can turn to for help. And if they don't, they just don't want to. That's how I feel. And that's what I see, because I'm somebody who has been trying for 16 years as alderman to help people, and had to come to a point where I can no longer help people who don't want to be helped. They just want to do what they want to do with no consequences. And that's why our city is running amok, because young people feel like they can do whatever they do without consequences, and that they're invincible some kind of way. I mean, it is so troubling. Over the past 2 weeks, every few days you hear about a teenager being shot. That's a problem. And that's a problem we need to deal with. And I'm hoping that collectively as a board that we can come up with even better strategies, you know, to help people. I firmly believe that we have a lot of resources for our constituents to do better, because they know better. It's do they have the will to do better. We have SLATE, where we provide training opportunities. And no, you're not going to go down there on day one and get a job, but some things you have to work at. This instant gratification is not working, and we need to do better as a community. And I'm saying that on behalf of the African American community, because I just get tired of people making excuses. It's time out for excuses. As long as we make excuses, we'll never get better. We need to start applying good discipline, making sure that they have the right resources to do better. But at the end of the day, they make a choice. So I applaud you for this effort, and I want to be a co-sponsor.
Thank you.
Okay.
So we also had,
So I think we're gonna go ahead and, on line 1 of the bill, as long as everybody's fine with it, it's a Scribner's error, where it says an ordinance, repealing ordinance 63984. The ordinance is actually 63784.
If everybody.
We do have an amendment, but as long as everybody feels the Scribner's error, we can just move on.
Yeah, it's no big deal.
Okay. If nobody has a problem with it, we're going to go ahead.
Can I ask one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
And this is just, I bring it before the committee, on page 3, line 54, it reads, however, this does not preclude a police officer using his discretion from transporting said juvenile to his home. I think what you meant to go to said juvenile's home, it sounds like that, to me, that the police officer can transport him to the police officer's home, to his home. It's just a matter of wording, I think. I don't know. You read it and see if you want to change it. It's kind of ambiguous is what I'm saying.
So when we read from line 50, I think the subject, starting at 44, is the juvenile from the beginning. And it says, if the police officer determined that a person is, which is a juvenile, in violation of this ordinance, he shall take the juvenile to the police station or appropriate holding facility where a parent shall immediately be notified to come for the juvenile, whereupon they shall be questioned, and a written warning notice shall be issued to both the juvenile and the parent or parents and the Division of Family Services. However, this does not preclude an officer using his discretion from transporting said juvenile to his home. I think because we're talking about the juvenile, we only be referring to the juvenile's home.
Okay. All right. If you want to leave it, that's fine. It just to me, it's ambiguous, but it's a matter of style.
Thank you.
If there's no one else, I'll entertain a motion.
I moved we pass Board Bill 81 out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
And I'll second it. And previous, I don't know, Carol, you weren't here for previous roll, were you? So, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Boyd?
Aye.
Alderman Ornowitz?
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard?
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard? Alderman Muhammad? Alderwoman Boyd?
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard?
Aye.
Chairman Vaccaro?
Aye.
6 aye votes.
So we do have a due pass, and so that really almost is the end of the meeting, except I'd like to excuse Tamika Hubbard and John Muhammad for not being here. I think it's a great bill. I think if it doesn't do anything else, it lets people, I doubt that I even remember there was a curfew. And I do appreciate the reporter from the South Side and from the Post and from Channel 2 for being here, because it'll at least get the word out. I mean, there's probably a lot of people going, we have a curfew? Right. So I appreciated that. Then this meeting's adjourned.
Thank you all.
First interaction with the police, I got picked up on that.